Others will be looking to propel their man into the pink leader's jersey. The strong wind that sweeps across the coastal northwest corner of France played a role in whittling down the field yesterday, and it's blowing hard again, along with the attendant rain. A little bit of mud on the cobbles. It's got everything, and problems for riders throughout the field, throughout the day, as Breton Séché comes to grief. Difficulties for so many riders, punctures throughout the field. They've already been through the pavé once. That's 1.7 kilometres in Orchy. Just a total of just over 5 kilometres of pavé today. But I tell you what, it really makes a difference. And it's Pierre-Louis Perichon of Breton Séché Environment that had that difficulty. Up front, we've got 3 riders. Jimmy Engelvin of Europcar. Sicard, fantastic performance from him yesterday in the break, pretty much, well, in everything that was moving for much of the day. Managed to hang on in the bunch through to the finish, and this young neo-pro is making a bit of a name for himself. And Francis Dejeau also have a man up there, which is useful because they've got the overall leader, David Boucher it is, that is accompanying Engelvin and Ricard, and keeping an eye on them. And Engelvin very, very impressive through the first section of pavé. Managed to open up a gap on the chasers behind. Chasing group of about 10 riders, and that knitted back up together again. So we've got a main group now of around about 25 riders chasing these 3 riders up front, but it's breaking up on a regular basis through this really tough weather. The diminutive figure, that is Samuel Dumoulin. This is perfect conditions for him. He's a fast man, and if he's also a strong rider, on good form at the moment, could well be up for a big result today. Arnaud Démare, though, looking to defend that leader's jersey, and looks in fine shape. He did say after yesterday's performance, winning the first stage for the 2nd year in succession. Indeed, it was a repeat of last year's 1-2 on stage 1 with Ramon Sinkeldam in 2nd place. But Arnaud Démare said, I'm not quite as fit as I was this time last year. I took 9 full days off after the classic season, did a full classic season, just rested and relaxed after that. Really paid big tribute to his team for the great work that they did for him yesterday. Not so sure that he's got the form to defend it all week, but well, that could be a little bit of kidology. It's Démare that won yesterday. He has the overall lead, and naturally he also leads the points classification. Manuel Boaro it is who leads the mountains, and Top Sport Blandrin leading the team classification at the moment. 3 riders up front. They've got twice more across the finish line, 2 more sections of pavé to contend with, and these 3 riders out front, Magnus, are showing themselves to be the strong men of the race, particularly Engelvin and Ricard.
Well, they certainly have done so far, and I mean, it's a tough old day out there, and these cobblestones, certainly the section in Orchy is known to be very, very muddy at the best of times, and the last 600 meters or so is a relatively rough section as well. So it is certainly a test out there for everyone, and with the wind as well, you can see how it's kind of picking the groups apart all the time, and I think we're in for a proper bit of racing today, and
every man for himself out there.
Every man for a proper sort of Belgian classics type of conditions, really. Jimmy Engelvin, strong rider, very, very strong rider. Even so, even on the cobbles of Roubaix, he's done some very good performances out there. So there's no surprise that he was the man to lead across that first section and to basically split the whole peloton in half.
Hard to imagine just 5 kilometres of cobbles can make such a difference to a bike race, but I mean, you're an absolute specialist of the cobbles. No doubt you'd have enjoyed it out there. It's a weird and wonderful bike rider that would enjoy these conditions, but I suspect that Magnus Backstedt would have really been in his element today. Engelvin, like you say, seems to be going very well. Why does 5 kilometres? It's such a small amount. It's on a flat road, and yet it absolutely decimates the field.
Well, it is such an incredible amount of power required to go across the cobblestones quickly. Add the rain to that one, you're also adding an awful lot of technique that needs to be had to basically balance the bike on the cobblestone sections. And you can kind of almost draw similarities between climbing a very steep climb in terms of the power output and the effort required to ride fast across the cobblestones, and actually riding on these sections. And with that, you know, there's only a certain amount of riders who have actually got the the ability and the power to ride across them. Today, for instance, you don't only need to have the power to go across them, because the slower you go across the cobblestones, the more power is required to actually get yourself across them. When you're coming in there and you're holding 40-45 kilometers an hour, you're kind of skimming over the top of the cobbles, and it's not really that big an effort as such, you know, in inverted commas, really.
Yeah, relatively speaking.
But when it gets wet, it slows the speed down. You bounce an awful lot more. You also need then to have the feeling for when you got grip and you can actually put the proper amount of power down, and when, you know, your bike starts sliding a little bit, what to do with it, understanding the grip levels on muddy cobblestones. And I can probably only describe that as trying to ride your bike with slicks on ice. Very similar type of...
Might make a good sport, that.
Oh, yeah, I think that would be be a great sport to start.
One for the Winter Olympics, maybe, after the ice dancing. Yeah, the more power you've got, the easier and quicker you can react to every little change in grip conditions under wheel. Engelmann and Rijkaard going well at the moment. No surprise that Boucher not really helping out, because he's got Arnaud Démare behind, safely in the group at the moment, being shepherded through this difficult stage by several teammates, and that is a select group up front. Cofidis have several riders involved. I Am Cycling too, very active through yesterday's stage, not least from the man we see, number 41 there with the distinctive orange bike. And that is Sylvain Chavanel, twice the winner of this race in the past, and he is following two representatives of Française de Jeux, and they'll be chasing on the front, keeping the tempo high and managing the gap to these riders up front. 13 seconds for these riders as they head towards the second section of Pavé in Orchy. 1.7 kilometers, as I said, first appeared in 1980, and it's been ever present since in Paris-Roubaix. It's rated in Paris-Roubaix terms as a 3-star, 3 stars out of 5. Has a little L-shaped turn through it, and it's where Bonin most famously launched his attack this year that helped split up the group. And this gives you a little little small idea of little flavour of an idea of what they'll face in the Tour de France later this year. Okay, 3 riders out front with 12 seconds advantage. We're going for a quick commercial break. We'll be back very shortly. He sits 11th overall, 9 seconds back, having picked up a little bit of time bonus along the way. So Jonas Rijkaard is a danger to Arnaud Démare's overall position, so no question but that they'll be chasing this one down, as if they'd certainly be keeping it at a decent tempo in the group behind, because while the group has swelled a little since that first section of Pavé, it's still far from, well, a long way from the 133 riders that signed on this morning. Arnaud Démare currently has the advantage overall, and that is a narrow advantage, just 4 seconds over Ramon Sinkeldam. Yannick Martinez 5th in last year's first stage and 3rd yesterday. So the same names appearing each year, and he currently sits 3rd overall, 6 seconds behind Kluge of I Am, 7 seconds, and Jacobs of Top Sport Flandre, and that's the top 5 overall. As this group is lined out in a big way, we're approaching the end of this first of 3 laps, and certainly brewing up nicely. Quick reminder, you can reach us on Twitter. It's at DQ Sport for myself, at Magnus Backstedt for the man alongside, and don't forget to hashtag Eurosport Cycling. We'll try and pick up a few of those during the day. Didn't get a chance yesterday. It was so busy and hectic with all the wind. But we've got green gold for me, Robert Kingsland, Howard Davis, and Tara Fogarty is also watching keenly with interest to see how her boyfriend Sam Bennett gets on. 5th yesterday for Team NetApp Endura, and it'll be interesting to see how he's enduring these conditions on the cobbles. And Magnus, the riders that have ridden Paris-Roubaix really have a big advantage here, because they'll be just so familiar with this section of cobbles.
Well, it's you know, they will get sort of familiarised with the cobbles quite quickly, but a lot of the guys will know it from previous races, certainly the Paris-Roubaix. You know, they tend to use these ones relatively frequently as such. the difference is, though, when you're coming into cobblestone sections in a stage race, and certainly a race like we have here as well, a slightly smaller one, there is a difference in the riders' abilities on the cobblestones. We've seen in the Tour de France in the past where, you know, some of the climbers and GC riders get in onto the cobblestones and they're not quite used to riding them, versus the classic specialists who ride them in a completely different way, and that sometimes can cause a bit of extra sort of crazy movements going on, and cause a few extra crashes as well on top of that. So it's certainly not an easy thing to do, and today I think it's very, very dangerous out there.
Riders leaving gaps on this long left-hander that comes within 500 meters of the line, so that is an extra test and an extra challenge for the group, and it'll be interesting to see how big that group is that's sprinting in for the win, or whether someone manages to clip off and go solo through to the end. Jonas Reichardt on the front at the moment, looking around him to see if the group are coming up behind, and indeed if Jimmy Engelvan in the green of Team Europcar is ready to take a turn. 2 laps remaining for the riders. Third in line there, of course, the Francis de Jeux rider, David Boucher, who's playing a watching brief. It's his job just to mark this move and just to sit on the back. He's not being lazy. It's a job of work that he's doing.
Yeah, it definitely is. You know, he's not supposed to be riding on the front there, and if these guys keep on riding and keep on sort of dragging away from the peloton, then he's in a great position later on to either make an attack and solo into the finish. Alternatively, he hasn't spent any energy, and when he comes into to the finish, then he can help Arnaud Démare out in terms of getting another lead out going. Today, though, I've got a feeling we're going to look at a slightly smaller select group coming across the finish line, and certainly having a look at what's happened after the first time we went across the cobbles. You know, the peloton was split up in a number of different groups, and it's certainly not going to get any easier as the race goes on.
So who are you expecting the big moves from? Maybe Chavanel?
Yeah, Chavanel, I think, is certainly a possibility to have a proper go today. But, you know, we got, I think, looking at Jimmy Engelvan, he looked very strong going over the cobbles last time. There are certainly more riders than those guys in here who are very, very capable of riding the cobblestone sections, and obviously the crosswinds that we got as well out on the circuit.
Surprised to see Engelvan using his energy this early? Would you be of a mind to keep a little bit in reserve?
A little bit too early, I think, to have a go. But then again, if you're feeling confident, and obviously with the conditions that we have, it's a question of trying to stay safe as much as anything, being out there as well. So he's obviously feeling like, you know, he's doing the right thing.
Just over 40 kilometres to go in stage 2 of Dunkirk 4 days, and 3 riders up front have a narrow advantage, less than 10 seconds. Jimmy Engelvan took a slightly better route through that last roundabout, and as a result manages to open up a few bike lengths advantage over Jonas Reichardt. David Boucher tucked in behind them. How much longer will they last out front? That group behind has certainly swelled considerably since the last section of Pave, but it's set to split again very shortly, and riders coming to Greyval. One of the AG2R riders just tiptoes across those. Well, it's such a slick under tyre conditions there, and Engelvan managed to bunny hop his way across that roundabout without any difficulty, going the other side of it. An AG2R rider has a little bit of road rash to contend with as we arrive on the pave once more. 10 seconds to the good, and that's a perfect situation, and let's see just how strong Jonas Reichardt is. A very inexperienced rider, but no lack of ambition, no lack of courage and belief in his own abilities.
We should probably say inexperienced at this level.
Yes, indeed,
you know,
yeah,
having
of course,
obviously been brought up racing in Belgium on the Kermesse scene there, you tend to gain an awful lot of experience in most surfaces and types of racing, and this section is definitely looking very, very muddy, so the guys need to stay very attent, and if you can ride right on the middle, on the little ridge that you got there. But if your bike starts slipping either side just a little bit, you can't try and sort of steer your way back onto it. You've got to let the bike drift and then swing back up slowly again. So it's a completely it's a very, very difficult technical ride to do on the cross of these cobblestones. And watch out for the motorbike as well, because he's not sure to stay upright either.
Yeah, you leave a little gap if you possibly can, or if he does that for you. And what? So how many times would you go and look at each cobble section ahead of Paris-Roubaix?
Minimum once, probably twice a year before the actual race. Tend to do, you know, get a film camera out as well and film it to see where the best place to ride is, and certainly if there's different conditions as well, what to do, and you can kind of compare what seems the best line on across each different cobblestone section.
Oh, Rijkaard's absolutely flying, thunders past the motorbike there without any difficulty whatsoever. And the contrast between Rijkaard, Engelvan and Boucher, and riders at the back of the group from Wallonie, Bruxelles, it's just not quite the same facility, not the same strength either, and just not able to generate the power necessary to really glide over the cobbles, was marked in the extreme. And it really gives you an idea of just how difficult this is. This is a top-class professional rider who's really, really struggling to get the pedals turned on this well, very difficult section, and you can be sure he's not enjoying it much at the moment.
No, they're certainly not enjoying this down the back of the peloton, and you know, it becomes a question of you can't actually pick your line the way where you want to ride when you've got many riders around you and people are sliding all over the place, and you know, it's quite a scary place to hang out really at the back of the peloton. The best place to be is right up near the front here, where you got, you know, a lot less risks involved in the actual riding. The only risk that you really have to deal with is your bike slipping and you coming down.
Well, Jimmy Engelvan finished in the big group that was just over 13 minutes behind the lead group yesterday, so he's not a contender overall. Jonas Rijkaard, though, certainly is 11th overall at 9 seconds, so within a stage win of the overall lead of Arnaud Démare. So no question but that this will be marshalled. And as I say it, look at that, Sylvain Chavanel, second in line, just ponders through with a couple of Cofidis riders for company, making it a lead group of 6, and I feel sure that there'll be a few others coming up very shortly. So as we expected, Sylvain Chavanel is the man on the attack on the cobbles.
Yeah, definitely put a big move in on that section there, and has split up the peloton. It'll be interesting to see what's left down the back there now, and if there's any group organised, and obviously most importantly, where is Arnaud Démare? Well,
these are interesting arrival, some extra troops here, so it's 5 riders up front plus 1 who's sitting on watching, and that's David Boucher of the overall leaders Française de Jeux team. And Sylvain Chavanel straight to the front and has a little look around, seems comfortable as he did yesterday. Twice a winner of this race in the past, as we said, and not really the classic season that he would have hoped for. The man from I Am Cycling could retrieve the first half of the season with a great victory in Dunkirk. The bunch behind is only just a few seconds behind, but this has done a little bit more damage. And this is a slightly different characteristic of racing, where being up front, and look at that, there's 6 up front, there's 3, 4 riders maybe chasing, and then maybe 10 riders behind that. Maybe 5 or 6 chasing. I think they're about to make the junction, and that could be the select group up front. The question is Arnaud Démare in there? Now, what can they do about closing it down? Still quite a distance to go, so just under 24 miles left, 37.5 kilometres. And it's time to have a little survey of the scene as riders have a little look around to see how many riders have made this. And there's quite a bit of daylight between these riders up front and the group behind.
Yeah, there certainly is, but you know, they obviously had a look around to see who was coming. Did they have any teammates in there? Because obviously 37 kilometres to go, a little bit early to go on a very small select group. But Rijkaard here, he's keen to keep this going. He doesn't want to sit down and wait for the group to get back together.
He's full of beans, isn't he?
He is, certainly.
Great to see the ambition of youth, the total lack of inhibition really is a sight to behold. And he's got a winning cohort from the Cofidis squad in the shape of Christophe Laporte. And Laporte's teammates behind have a little look over their shoulder. They're not going to contribute to this because they've got a teammate slugging away up front. So 2 riders now with the advantage, and Jonas Rijkaard is racing himself towards another one of those pink dossards for tomorrow. Will it be more? Can he manage to take on the entire field of the Dunkirk 4 days and come up with a big result? Still a long way to go, but who would rule it out? The way the groups are lined out at the moment, little cracks developing towards the back. This is tough racing indeed. And Ferin Classique, Dolcini and Roubaix Lyon Metropole. Riders suffering a little bit at the back of the group, but then it is the back of the select group, remember. That's Goric Gardain who's at the back of that group. I can tell you he was a member of the 4-man breakaway group that was out front for quite a bit of this stage. So he's doing well indeed to manage to hang on after that. Julien Fouchard of Cofidis, Goric Gardain of Verin Classic Dolcini, as I mentioned, Quentin Berthoud of Belgium and Wallonie Bruxelles, and Victor Kampenarts of the Top Sport Vlaanderen squad were out front with a significant advantage, but the hard, tough racing cost them dear, because before the television cameras started rolling, they were already back in the fold. The scene over the outskirts of Orchy. 8,000 people live in this area. Just towards the end of the 16th century, this town was created. Town hall. Indeed, they had a parade and official commemoration for the end of World War II in the village this morning, lest we forget. Now at the head of the field, riders looking around, and they can see that it's a group coming up behind. Several of the riders will be happy about that. So it looks as if the junction is about to be made, and this bunch will be compacto one. But how many riders will have been shelled for the rest of the day? I don't think it's going to be a 60-rider group at the conclusion of the next kilometre or so. 14 seconds now, and they're indicating that Arnaud Demar is in the second group, and that explains why several of the Française de Jeux riders were looking behind them, waiting for the arrival of Arnaud Demar. So inside the final 35 kilometres, total of 166 kilometres for the riders today. It's wind, driving rain, and they've got a few cobbles to contend with as well. The toughest of tough conditions, and that is the evidence of that fact. The bunch has been whittled down significantly from the 133 riders that started today, down to significantly less than half of that out front. And just ahead of this main group, we have 2 riders, one of which is Jonas Rijkaard, who's already been on the attack a couple of times yesterday, another at least twice that we've seen so far today, and he's out front again. And this man's enthusiasm shows no bounds at the moment, because he's managed to stretch his advantage once more, around about the 10 seconds advantage. He's got a little bit of company as well, as riders towards the tail of this group now look to see can they get some sustenance from their team cars behind. Heading towards the bell very shortly, and the company for Edvig Kammerts for Cofidis that has decided to accompany Rijkaard. Rijkaard, as I say, just 20 years of age. This is his first season at this level. Signed for Top Sport Vlaanderen. There is a 26th place finish in Grand Prix de la Somme. 36th yesterday for what it was worth, but in the group after being out front for much of the day. No great results so far, but he's had 9 race days and just over 1,200 kilometres of racing in his young legs, and still seems to be getting stronger and stronger. Speaking of strength, we've got 4 riders from Française de Jeux towards the front of the group. And Arnaud Demar, we believe, is back in the fold. I don't want to commit to that as...
Well, he was earlier anyway, and it's a question of whether they manage to get themselves back into the 12 seconds back now. So
well, they're indicating that Arnaud Démare, the race leader, the overall race leader, is still behind. I think the fact that we saw some Francis de Gea on the front of the group led me to believe that Arnaud Démare had managed to safely make his way back in there, but he's not there yet, if that graphic is to be believed. And so what's the thinking here from Francis de Gea? Are they riding on the front, really drilling it? It looks like they're giving it a little bit.
Well, they're just keeping the tempo up, really, and seeing as Arnaud doesn't seem to quite have the legs to go across the cobblestones, they can't really sit up and wait for him either, or send a couple of riders back to drag him back on either. So they need to focus on the race up the front where you know, the actual racing is happening. And if Arnaud gets back in and he manages to get himself across the final section of cobbles a little bit better, then they'll deal with that situation then. Right now, you've got a couple of riders up the road anyway, and you know, they need to be sort of kept at bay a little bit. It may actually be that Arnaud has made his way back into this group, and
yes, and it's 15 seconds to the two riders out front, and Démare is safely in there, so Francis de Gea back to the front to marshal it. That's the likely situation. It's tough to pick the riders out, of course, with their rain jackets. Constant theme over the last couple of years. As Sylvain Chavanel, calling for the team car, obviously believes this is a relatively benign moment in the racing action, and it's safe for him to go back to the IM team car, which has made its way safely to the front of the cavalcade. Coming up from Team Car 4, and time for a bit of a chat. No team radio, so Chavanel.
Former professional rider there, Eddie Seigneur, in the team car as well for IM. A man who rode quite well on the cobblestones as well, and loved this kind of races.
You're calling this one, Magnus. What would you be saying to Chavanel right now?
Just make sure that you stay up near the front, stay safe. If you got something in the legs on the final time across the cobblestones, you know, put it down and see where you're at, and at that point commit to it. I mean, Chavanel is not really going to want to take the risks going into a bunch sprint in the wet like this. He's just going to try and position himself as definitely Arnaud Démare is back in that group again. I can see the pink arm warmers by the...
Yes, that's he's sitting, what, sixth rider there in the group, with the team of Francis de Gea once more lined out on the front. Riders trying to make their way back up from the team cars. Still a significant size of group that's managed to detach itself from the rest. By the end yesterday, probably about 60-odd riders up front. '64 actually, as I checked the sheet from yesterday. And now 24 seconds advantage to those two riders, so it looks as if Rijkaard's efforts have borne fruit, at least for a little while. It was worth persevering, and he has been given some advantage, as there's a little bit of a ceasefire. While Francis de Gea is setting a steady tempo up front, they're not really fully focused on chasing these two down up front. Clearly they feel confident that they can get them back whenever they need them, and they're going to save their powder, keep it as dry as possible ahead of that final thrash across that final section of cobbles. Hedwig Kammertz from Cofidis, the red of Cofidis, takes over on the front from the blue and white of Topsport Vlaanderen, represented once more by Jonas Rijkaard.
This is a good move as well in terms, if you're looking from La Française de Gea's point, you know, two riders up there, 24 seconds. It means that they can kind of settle things down a little bit in the peloton, and with that, just keep things under control, keep Arnaud out of trouble, yeah, just keep things as safe as possible.
Peter Knight on Twitter says, what a great build-up on Eurosport to the Giro with the 4 days of Dunkirk and Women's Tour of Britain, and so say all of us. Eurosport, the home of cycling. It's wall-to-wall cycling at the moment. We've got Giro build-up coming straight after this broadcast with Rob Hatch. We've got Greg LeMond's Le Monde of cycling, and also Tour of Azerbaijan is on later on at 22:30 Central European time. Just under 30 kilometres to go on stage 2 of the 4 days of Dunkirk, the 166 kilometres from Hazebrouck to Orchy. And the riders have had a tough day of racing so far, twice across the cobbles on the finishing circuit in Orchy. Cobbles made famous by the Paris-Roubaix. And already they have cost several riders dear. Plenty of punctures, plenty of riders out the back. Punctured tyres, punctured lungs. Just about everything has gone wrong for several of the riders, but still, it's a decent-sized group up front, and we're getting set for some serious action when they hit the cobbles for the final time, with about 19.5 kilometres to go. It's just under 20 kilometres to go. It's just over 7 kilometres from now. That's when they hit the final section of cobbles. Two riders up front. That's Edwig Kammertz for the Cofidis squad and Jonas Rijkaard for Top Sport Vlaanderen. Rijkaard's been on the attack since this race began yesterday, pretty much non-stop. And his reward at the moment, 22 seconds advantage up front. Top Sport Vlaanderen team car moving up the group. As riders think about jettisoning the rain gear they've been carrying with them and making themselves as light and as aerodynamic as possible for the end game coming very shortly. And that is a decent-sized group going to the cobbles next time round. The important job, as you say, Magnus, getting up front.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you say it's a decent-sized group, it's still only probably, what, 45, maybe 50 riders, if that, and with reasonably wide roads leading in towards the final section of cobblestones, it shouldn't be too difficult to move yourself into position if you have the legs to do it. But it's also a question of getting there and then managing to hold on to whatever goes on across the cobblestones, which is the more difficult part, really. These two guys out front, though, they keep on working relatively well, but losing a little bit of time, and with the sort of effort that La Française des Jeux is putting in, I think they're going to want to try and bring these guys back. Last section of cobblestones comes at 19.5 kilometres to the finish, and at that point, I think there's certainly a couple of teams in the peloton are going to want to have this everyone back together, and given all the opportunities then to have a proper go across the cobblestones. And if you've got aspirations of making a move across these cobbles, certainly in the wet, ideally you need to enter them first, so you don't have to deviate from the line to actually go around someone, and with that then make the attack. Because as soon as you have to go offline on these stones and the wet and muddy stones, you're taking quite a big risk as well, because get into the puddles, you don't really know what's underneath it. You run the risk of puncturing. There's also a lot more slippery off the side of that sort of center ridge. So any movement that you have to make, it becomes a lot more dangerous for the rider. So with that, I think if it's possible for Française des Jeux to come in there with the whole team on the front and then making a concerted effort, team effort across the cobblestones with Arnaud Demar on the wheel, they are likely to be able to completely split this whole group to bits and pieces with, 5, 6, maybe 7 riders on the wheel, and that then is likely to be the sort of race-winning move.
Yeah. So it's one of those rare occasions in cycling where being on the front, racing into the wind, is actually preferable.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely preferable in these kind of conditions, and sometimes, well, certainly when you're riding the likes of Paris-Roubaix, you actually spend the energy before you get onto the cobblestones, and then on the cobblestones you try and sort of just hold it or recover a little bit whilst you ride across them, and it's certainly very, very similar kind of tactics going on today.
Question in, why aren't Team Sky at Dunkirk? Well, it's not a World Tour race, so there's no obligation, and Sky Resources have been spread a little bit thin of late. They're getting set for the Giro start in Belfast tomorrow. And Tour of California is coming up in a couple of weeks as well, and they've had plenty of injuries and illnesses that have meant that they haven't been able to field full rosters at each race they've been to of late, so I'm sure they're delighted that they didn't have to go to Dunkirk. That doesn't mean that we don't have a very, very strong field indeed. And look at the way it's starting to bunch up. Just Well, maybe a kilometre ago we saw it lined out in the front with Francis de Jeux. Now we see the other teams and riders starting to crowd towards the front and waiting to pounce, and looking forward to the opportunity to... It's a race within a race, really, to that section of cobbles.
Yeah, and it also kind of indicates that there's a certain amount of headwind at the moment as well, because the riders are actually able to go up. Then as soon as you get a little bit of crosswind, everyone tries to string out along the side of the road and try and get a little bit of shelter, whereas it's not super fast at the moment, and with that everyone is kind of moving up, and obviously we're not that far out from the final section of cobblestones.
GPS telling us that the gap is now down to 12 seconds, pretty much halved in the last little while, so perhaps that's another indication that the riders are toiling away into a headwind. It's a driving headwind, around about 40 kilometers an hour. Really tough windy conditions. We saw a little bit earlier Jimmy Engelvin was out front, and he has a deep section rear wheel, but very shallow section front wheel, not just for the fact that he's got a little bit of pave, but the wind really whips across.
Riker just had a little bit of a slip on the rear wheel then, just going around that corner. Started pedaling and then backed off straight away, and as his rear wheel slid.
Whoa, dicey moment, but manages to keep it upright. Rijkaard's still in there. Kammert's driving along in the front, has a little look around, sees that Rijkaard's safely in there, and Rijkaard says, no, I'm going to leave you out front for a little while longer. So maybe he's starting to feel the distance. 13 seconds in arrears. Topsport Vlaanderen come up for a little bit of a look, but it's a little bit of a conversation going on as well between representatives of Francis de Jeux, who have the race leaders safely sitting in there about fifth wheel at the moment. Those distinctive pink sleeves, pretty much the only indication that he's got a pink leader's jersey. And Sylvain Chavanel floats his way towards the front.
Yeah, just starting to move into position. Obviously got a couple of corners to deal with as we head in towards the finish line and past the finish line, and then it's not that far till we hit that section of cobblestone. So all the riders are now starting to jostle a little bit for position.
So the gap to the two riders up front, hovering at the 14-second mark, just over 22.5 kilometers to go on this second stage of the 4 days of Dunkirk. It's 5 days long, of course. That's been a standing joke for quite a while, really, in world cycling. But originally, this event, way back in 1955, was instituted as a 4-day event. It was 4 days for a long time, and that's just what it's known. Jours De Dunkerque, in the northwest of France. Traditional, very popular stage race that has been won by some of the very best in the history of cycling. Freddie Martin's 4 times a winner. Jacques Anquetil, twice a winner. Plenty of others besides top names over the years that have tasted victory, not least Sylvain Chavanel, twice a winner and sitting well to the fore, thinking about the possibility of making it 3. And the two riders up front, Cameras, this is the final look at the finish line that the riders will have ahead of the finish. They've got one more lap to do, and Rijkaard isn't really all that confident on the turns, is he? This is long left-hander. Slow in, fast out means that he's right on the wheel of Kammert's on the way out of that corner, but he certainly wasn't too ambitious on the way in.
Well, two completely different styles of cornering there, and Rijkaard had the patience going into it and slowing down, whereas Kammert definitely went in a little bit hot, but had to slow down right at the very end to avoid the barriers. And this is the tricky corner coming into the final, into the sprint. Negotiating this one is going to... I'm almost placing a bet we're going to see a couple of riders in the barriers there.
It's definitely not a nice finish, and I think the organisers are probably gambling on the likelihood that we're not going to have a very big group sprinting for the line, but, well, you'd never know.
Well, I think it's quite a nice finish as such. It's just that corner is going to be quite important. 500 metres, you ideally need to come through that one first and second with a teammate in front of you, and then hit it out straight away, because it's such a slow corner as it is now. The acceleration that's going to have to be made is going to be a progressive one, which means if you come in from further back, I'm talking 7th, 8th wheel, then you're going to really be struggling to get on terms with it, and depending on obviously who's on the front. But I think it's going to be quite an interesting finish to be had.
So good finish, a challenging finish.
Good and challenging finish, yeah, I like it.
One more lap to go for the riders. Just over 21 kilometres, well, 20.4 kilometres now for the two riders up front, and their advantage through that little technical section has expanded from around about 15 seconds up to over 20 now. So a few seconds gained there as we see Wanty Group Gobert. A little bit of ambition being shown from their riders through the feed zone ahead of the bunch and looking to jump off the front.
Well, not too far to go now until we hit the cobblestones either. We're looking at about 600 meters. So good move to get himself out front there, which means he's going to be out of all the jostle for position, and that tends to be quite a tricky one.
Marco Minard of Wanty Group Gobert has a little steals a look over his shoulder, and the information he gets is that he's got well, decent advantage in the bunch safely yesterday, so he's well in contention overall. And different schools of thought on the best way to negotiate this roundabout. Some riders bunny hopping across the it really is a tough and technical one in these conditions, isn't it? Yeah,
definitely. And then as soon as you get through that roundabout, you've got probably about 500, well, not even that, a couple of 100 meters until you hit this, the cobblestone section. And it's really quite important to stay near the front there and get that roundabout right, because if you pick the wrong side of it, it means you're losing an awful lot of places in the group, and there just isn't enough time to get yourself near the front again and regain your position.
More riders attacking off the front. The two riders up front, Reichert and Kammertz, have a decent advantage. They turn right and onto the cobble section well in the lead, 20 seconds to the good. Marco Minard is also going to make it onto the cobbles ahead of the group, and it looked like at least one other rider had managed to put a little bit of daylight between himself and the main group up front, as we see the two riders that are currently leading this second stage of Dunkirk 4 days. On the rear is Jonas Reichert of Top Sport Vlaanderen, and on the front Edwig Kammertz of the Cofidis squad. Minard has a little bit of daylight, and it looked like one of the IM cycling riders going to the front. Can it be Chavanel?
It did look like it was Chavanel. So if that's the case, then we're likely to have a very, very strong pace being set across this section here now.
Well, this section is 1.1 kilometres, and then very almost immediately into the final 600 kilometres. Chavanel driving on the front. See the way he's powering on the pedals. His body is rocking, but he's really getting the maximum amount of power into the pedals and dragging a couple of riders from Europcar and Cofidis with him.
But you can also see how he's putting an awful lot of pressure down and then backing off the pressure and then back on it again, and that's just a question of finding that grip with the rear wheel and putting the pressure down when you got a decent amount of grip.
How does it feel when it's perfect? Are you sitting back in the saddle, a little bit forward on the saddle?
It varies. Oh, there's a crash there as well.
Riders down on the right-hand side of the road, and then almost inevitably MTN Quebec, is it Cielek? I'm not so sure it is actually, but certainly a rider from MTN Quebec, and also Cofidis. They have riders up front. They also have riders on the deck, and that was almost inevitable, given this is the critical point in this second stage, and riders now in rosary bead formation, just in ones with several bike lengths between each of them, and that just indicates how difficult it is as we look at the chasers behind, led by Sylvain Chavanel of the IM cycling squad. Wanty Group Gobert, that I suspect is Marco Minard, has been picked up, and we've got Europcar and Cofidis also represented. But look at the strength of Chavanel as he immediately drives clear, and he's racing across the gap to the two riders up front.
Well, it's not just the strength, it's the commitment of his attack as well. He's not really looked around to see if anyone else is there. He's just, you know, putting the pressure down, get across this section, and then assess the situation. Who's there? Is there anyone with me, or am I just going to have to do the last 17 kilometers on my own? Obviously, he's still got a couple of riders out front there at about 15 seconds, but if he can get across to them, that would be a great opportunity for Chavanel now.
It's a big bid for glory from Sylvain Chavanel. Look at the pain etched on his face. 34 years of age now, but still some big race results in the legs of this class rider. Twice a winner of the 4 days of Dunkirk. As I said, he's won 3 stages of the Tour de France in his time. Also won a couple of national time trial championships in France, so he's well able to sit down and drive for home and lay down the power. These two riders up front, I feel, are very shortly to be joined by Sylvain Chavanel. Looked like there's at least one other rider chasing behind.
Looked like there's another Cofidis rider on his way up towards Sylvain Chavanel, and
well, that'll make it interesting.
That would make it very interesting, and a good move for Cofidis in that case.
Yeah, if Cofidis managed to get two riders in the move, well, tactically that well, it makes it difficult for Sylvain Chavanel. Currently looking at favourite status in this stage, but still 17.5 kilometres to go. And once things settle down after that section of pavé, it'll be interesting to see just how many representatives of Française des Jeux have managed to make the selection. Tiptoeing through this little S-bend, racing on these narrow country lanes, heading towards the finish in Orchy. It's Sylvain Chavanel bidding for glory, and very shortly to make the junction with the two up front. Steals a look behind. Who's coming up behind? And as you say, Magnus, it is one of the riders from Cofidis, and it's a very, very narrow advantage. And the bunch behind, well, whittled down, I'd say probably sitting at about 15 riders. Tough to make a real analysis from this distance. Maybe a little less than 15 riders chasing behind, and they're certainly riding up and over at the moment. Whether all of those riders are committed in there remains to be seen. So now we are 3 up front, shortly to become 4.
Yeah, very good move from Cofidis, obviously having a man out there, but whoever it is, I haven't quite spotted who this rider is, has done a fantastic job in bridging across to Sylvain Chavanel and the leading riders.
Well, it's the chasers behind. It's certainly a lot less than 15 riders. Let's get a look very shortly and see what's in there. I think a few more will be coming up from behind, but we're inside the final 20 kilometres, and oh, Demar has made it. Great effort.
One of the Wallonie-Brussels riders not particularly happy with the efforts being made in that group. It's probably a little bit too many riders.
Florian Seneschal has managed to make it up there for the Cofidis team. He's accompanied by his teammate Edvig Kammertz, and Seneschal on the attack yesterday as well. So clearly has come into the 4 days of Dunkirk with good legs, and there is a group of what, 7 or 8 riders behind very shortly to join up with them, included in which is the overall race leader Arnaud Demar. About 10 riders.
I think I counted to 10 if my eyes are not deceiving me here.
I ran out of fingers. Just about inside the final 10 miles of this second stage of the 4 days of Dunkirk, and it's boiling up nicely for a very interesting finish. Cofidis have the advantage. They won't want to see this one come back together again. Neither indeed will Sylvain Chavanel, who's given himself an excellent opportunity to take this race overall. He'll look for the stage victory. He'll also be thinking about the overall.
Would definitely be thinking about the overall, but this is an opportunity here now. If these 4 riders can keep on driving it hard and kind of get the edge off the chasing 10-man group, then all of a sudden, if they're not working well together, ones and twos like this, it's not really going to make too much of a difference unless they can bridge it very, very quickly, which it looks like they're actually managing to do. Sometimes you can get it to, you persevere with that 10-15 second gap, and then all of a sudden the wind kind of goes out of the chasing pack, and that's when you really get the good advantage and manage to hold it all the way to the finish.
And of course now you have a situation where the group up front is about the same size as the group behind, so they've got the same amount of logically they have the same amount of power, indeed probably a bit more, because these are the ones that were able to attack, so they have a bit stronger.
The only thing is, though, the whole of the La Française des Jeux team have missed out on this move, so they clearly will be riding with whatever men they have left in that group.
Will Arnaud Demar himself perhaps chance going to the front? There's very little to choose between them. You can see it on screen. 6 riders up front.
If I was Arnaud Demar at this point and I had a teammate in there, I would tell him, look, put everything you can down for the next couple of 100 meters, or for as long as you can, and then as soon as you see him starting to drop off the pace a little bit, you make that big jump, and basically a big sprint across to the breakaway group here. And ideally in that case you get across on your own as well, because very few riders are going to be able to follow Arnaud Demar when he makes one of his sprints.
Well, we see it's actually one of the Europcar riders that is the first to make the junction, and the attacks are coming from Roubaix Lille Metropole from this group. And it didn't really amount to much because Chavanel's immediately onto the wheel, but there's not much pattern to the racing, and that's when it's at its most exciting, because we're inside the final 15 kilometres. And not everybody is able to give a big turn here. We see riders from AG Tour Le Mondial. Chavanel goes to the front once more. Is it to put manners on the group and try and get things organised a bit, or has he shut it all down?
Well, he moved across to hope for some help, but clearly are a couple of undecided minds in here as to what to do. Topsport Flandern have got 2 riders in there, and they're obviously not.
And Chavanel tries to maybe take a couple out the back, or at least encourage them to contribute to the effort, and he gets the "after you" Claude sign, which will be a certain amount of disappointment. Kenny Van Bilsen it was from Topsport Flandern that indicates to Chavanel, well, you know, I'm not coming up, you better close that one, and Chavanel duly does.
Yeah, but I didn't quite understand that piece of tactic there from him. It needs to be riding with these guys and putting the pressure on throughout the whole the whole of this line, because it's in everyone's interest in this, what is it now, 15-man, maybe a little bit more group to keep on working and staying away. And we're talking even for Arnaud Demar in this case, who's in this group now. He still needs to come through and work as well, because otherwise getting all these little jumps all the time, sooner or later a group will drift off the front, and that's not going to be good for anyone's interest. Sylvain Chavanel now backing all the way down the back of the group, just to make sure he tries to organise things and try to make sure that he brings everyone with him up and start taking their turns.
Well, very shortly this group behind is going to make the junction, because there isn't a lot of organisation from those riders up front. Maybe 12-15 riders on the front of the group, but few little attacks and very little coordination at the moment, whereas behind, well, you've got committed chase going on.
Yeah, it's also a difference when if you've got race radios, then these riders up the front here will be told exactly what's happening behind, and you know, whether they should persevere with the break. Now they have to make that decision themselves, and some riders obviously not quite that confident and comfortable with making decisions. They keep on sort of holding back a little bit, and you know, before you know it, these guys are all going to be brought back by the bigger chasing group behind. And
doesn't seem to be the right sort of impetus in this group. Arnaud Demar goes to the front and does a bit of a turn. It would definitely suit him if this group stays away. Having said that, doesn't look like he's got a lot of help or support from his Française de Jeu squad, who've been toiling away chasing for pretty much a day and a half and a little bit more than that.
I was going to say, watch out for a big move from Sylvain Chavanel around about 7-8 kilometers from the finish. If this continues, or as he sees the group is getting slightly closer, he'll probably have a big go off the front to try and drag away maybe 1 or 2 other riders and make it to the finish like that.
Well, Arnaud Demar does have a little bit of support, and he's put that straight on the front to try and line this group out and make sure that they're going to make it as difficult as possible for those riders behind to make the junction. And as we approach the final 10 kilometers, it's touch and go whether these riders are going to stay away. Will there be any sort of interest in riding up and over? Kenny Van Bilsen, as we saw a little while ago from Topsport Flandern, not too keen on going to the front. He's finished 4th yesterday, capable of good finish, on good form at the moment. And Bilsen felt that wasn't really the time to be going to the front. So representatives from all the leading teams, including Française de Jeu and the race leader Arnaud Demar, is sitting about 5th overall at the moment. Sylvain Chavanel, who we've mentioned so often as we run through the line. De Klerk was well up in the sprint yesterday as well. Drucker is capable of a fast sprint, so there's some great finishers involved here. Seneschal on the attack yesterday is there for Cofidis, as indeed is his teammate Kammertz. And this the group behind that's chasing. And riders trying to clip off. It gets to that sort of, it's 15 seconds they're indicating. Right about 10 seconds is that gap that riders often feel that they can jump across.
Yeah, 10 seconds is definitely bridgeable. 15 seconds is a lot more difficult. That looked like it was Jonas Ahlstrand, the Swedish rider for Giant Shimano, who is trying to make that bridge.
Strong rider, finished well back yesterday. Not sure what the difficulty was for him, but he's looking to jump across that gap and change the tactical mix up front. Looks as if he's going to get on pretty quickly as well. Well, he's about halfway between now. Let's see if he can sustain the effort. 12 seconds between the lead group and the big group behind. Jonas Alstrom, that looks as if he's going to bridge as more attacks off the front of the lead group, and really it's just too big and too uncooperative a group to last all the way to the finish. 12 seconds between this lead group and the group chasing behind. Little look over the shoulder, and it's sitting fourth in line. Second, just behind the green of Europe car, is the race leader, Arnaud Demar. And Demar is well, he's playing it well at the moment. Playing a good card tactically. I mean, from his point of view, would he just go to the back of this group? And
I don't think he can go to the back of this group and expect to be dragged along into the finish. He needs to stay up there and needs to actually contribute a bit to the work that's being done as well. So, and it's in his interest to get into the finish with a slightly smaller group, rather than getting the bigger group who's actually closing in second by second and have a much bigger sprint finish. It just, the difference and the sort of, obviously having a lot more riders involved in the sprint is obviously going to be more tricky to get position, come through that final corner in a safe way. And I've got to say, I'm slightly curious as to what these guys out front here were thinking when they had a decent gap, and that they weren't actually happy to commit to riding it all the way into the finish. They've just been playing a tactical game, which, you know, I think they outsmarted themselves, really.
Yes, it's frustrating to see, isn't it? These riders look like it's all over for them. AG Tour and other teams have combined. Sylvain Chavanel is sitting on the back, and Magnus Backstedt has called a big attack from him very soon, and I think he's going to look over his shoulder very shortly and perhaps feel that he's got to have one last roll of the dice. Sylvain Chavanel would be less eager, I think, to go to the line with a group of, what, 25 riders.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of if these guys are coming back, you know, there's a good selection being made today in terms of the general classification, and if we're looking forward to the next couple of stages, there's some pretty hard racing coming up. So any of these guys now, it's actually quite a big group that's coming back up. But any of these guys obviously made themselves a bit of a favour in terms of keeping their general classification interest wide open.
So now we have a big group up front inside the final 10 kilometres, at least 25, probably more, 30 odd riders in there at the moment, and the attacks are coming almost inevitably. Wallonie Brussels involved in the next attack, and the indication, the way the riders are lined out at the moment, it is a critical phase of the race, just about as tough as you might imagine. Top Sport Flandre, the leading team, Wallonie Brussels, also showing much eagerness. And it doesn't look as if this one is going to last too long, because
they're still getting a bit of a gap there, you know, and there's not that many teams who've got riders spare, if you will, to actually sort of organise a chase. So it's going to come down to you know, getting a few different teams together and getting them to work together. And with if we're looking at what happened with this breakaway that has just been caught by a larger group, that's unlikely to happen. So unless La Française des Jeux have got a number of riders there who are willing to get on the front and start riding, I just question who's actually going to get on the front.
It's a perfect opportunity for an opportunist attack. 3 teams represented in here, including Top Sport Flandre, and one of his teammates is on the front of the bunch looking around, and it doesn't look as if anybody wants to chase that down. With just over 7 kilometres to go, these 3 riders have a great opportunity of bringing this one to the line in Orchy at the end of 166 hard kilometres. They're lined out behind. Who's doing the chasing? Française des Jeux, you feel, have to make a contribution. How many teammates has Arnaud Demar got to help him, and how much strength have they got, because they've done a lot of chasing so far. 5 seconds to the good. They're going to need a lot more than that. Absolutely lined out behind these three riders up front.
La Française des Jeux team car coming up there, speaking to the commissaire, requesting to move up through the peloton to have a word with their riders. And this is what happens when you don't have race radios anymore, and then you've got to mix the team cars into the racing as well, which is one of the reasons why I am pro radio.
It's a debate that will go on and on and on, whether they have them or not.
Well, it makes more sense to have them rather than sending your car up in amongst the guys when they're racing with 6.5 kilometers to go.
So we've got De Klerk of Top Sport Vlaanderen, Gisselink of Wanty Group Gobert. De Klerk, as I said, sprinting well, finished sixth. Well, he's currently sitting sixth overall. So well to the fore overall, and with a great opportunity, remember, of adding bonus seconds. But it looks as if the chase behind really hasn't let up, and I'm not so sure they're going to be out there a whole lot longer. Look at the way it's absolutely lined out. They're drilling it for the line inside 6 kilometers to go, and I don't think these three riders are going to last out front.
No, I think it will be difficult for them to hold on to this one, and it seems like there's quite an organised chase going on. And from the helicopter view, it looks like there's at least 3 or 4 Française des Jeux riders on the front.
So it's all up for Delfosse, De Klerk and Gisselink. Delfosse of Wallonie-Bruxelles, who kicked that one off. Shakes his hand, looks around. Française des Jeux driving on the front. A little bit of help from AG Tour La Mondiale. Is Sammy Dumoulin in there able to do a job for them?
Keep an eye on Jonas Ahlstrand as well in the giant Shimano kit there, because he's quite a good cornerer, certainly on the wet. He was a very, very good criterium rider up in Sweden, and he is a very fast finisher as well. So I wouldn't bet against him going through that corner at some pace today. And if he holds it upright, then he'll certainly be dangerous for the finish line.
So that sharp left-hand hairpin bend with 500 meters to go, set to be the next important rendezvous for these riders, and setting their sprinters up into that final roundabout and then taking them through to the finish line. And while it's the next headache for them, it's the conclusion, the denouement of this second stage of the 4 days of Dunkirk coming up very shortly. Inside 5 kilometers to go, Française des Jeux take it up. AG Tour La Mondiale sitting just behind that. Is Samuel Dumoulin able to get involved? Arnaud Démare looks in good shape at the moment. Having said that, it's been a tough job for him and for his teammates to stay up front. And he paid big tribute to them. Says that he doesn't have it. They've got a big day in the hills tomorrow. Not big mountains by any means, but plenty of hills. And that could be a little bit tougher for him to get through. But certainly this has been mission accomplished in terms of hanging on to his jersey. But he's still got a sprint to do to make sure of that.
What a job Johan Alfredo's on the front now has done, though. He's been on pretty much on the front all of this final lap for Arnaud Démare.
Several representatives of MTN Quebec in there. Is one of them Gerald Cielek. Ramon Sinkeldam, I do believe, has managed to make that group. We'll wait to get full confirmation of that.
And Cielek, I could just spot him on the left-hand side of the bunch there.
Now, this is the kind of finish that Cielek likes. Isn't afraid of the tough conditions. And having a few teammates for company today will be of some value to him. 3.5 kilometers to go. Team NetApp Endura also with a couple of riders in there. Hassan Bennett finished 5th yesterday as he managed to make this group. Sylvain Chavanel working his way up on the right-hand side of the road. Does he perhaps fancy a late attack? Late attack coming on the left-hand side of the road from Cofidis as the helicopter picks out Sylvain Chavanel on the right-hand side of the group. And was that a move towards the front, or was that a move off the front? The camera shot widens and reveals that it is indeed one of the Cofidis riders that has stolen a march with 3 kilometers to go. Has he got the strength to drive on for victory into Orchy? Time to take the glasses off and do a little bit of readjustment of his dress. And that is Edward Kammertz, who's showing impressive strength, given that he was out front. Well, not more than 10 kilometers ago, out front for quite a while indeed. Block goes on at the front of the peloton as they have a little look around to see how they're going to chase this one down and when are they going to really kick it off.
Obviously not really that dangerous on the general classification either. We lost 13 minutes yesterday, so they can afford to, La Française des Jeux can afford to let this man go ahead and take the stage win, and there's nothing would happen to Arnaud Demars overall, but you know.
Oh, big crash, several riders down. Representatives of Roubaix, Lille Metropole, Wanty Group, Gobert, Top Sport, Vlaanderen, and one of the MTN Quebec riders. Is that, no, I don't think it's Cialek.
No, I don't think it is.
Sincerely hope not. And we hope that all those riders are able to jump up and get back into it. Meanwhile, back up front, Edwin Kammertz is really dying a death. Is he managing to hang on? But he's still got a gap. It's worth persevering with. Don't look around. Absolutely drill it for the line. Just over 2K to go as we get a look at this treacherous little roundabout. And just front wheel goes from under you, and that's the end of that. And nowhere to go for the other riders. A little bit of bunny hopping.
Yeah, just typical wet weather slide out on the inside of the corner.
Nothing they can do inside the final 3 kilometers. They'll get the time of this group, but they won't have the opportunity to sprint for the win. Will any of the riders in that group be sprinting for the win, or will it be Edwin Kammertz that manages to hang on as he hits the final mile? 1.6 kilometers to go. It is looking difficult for him. Does he have enough of an advantage? Can't be more than 5 or 6 seconds. He's hanging out of an enormous gear at the moment. He's all over the bike. All form is gone, but he's piling it on as best he can and has steals a look behind him as he freewheels into, and these roads are so treacherous and slippery, and this is his advantage, because as he hits the closing stages here, as he hits this technical section of roads, he has a look behind him and sees that they haven't quite got, well, there was nothing to see there, and that will give him a little bit of heart, a little bit of belief that he should actually totally and utterly empty himself. Heading for the kite in the final, the second stage, the final kilometre of this
Still La Française des Jeux on the front there, though, with the same 2 people on working out for Arnaud Demars, and Arnaud sitting in a perfect position, but they're struggling to close down the gap, and they need to have closed this down in the final when they go through the final corner with 500 meters to go.
So Kammertz has the gap, but it's not surely going to be enough, or is it? Because there's 2 riders from Française des Jeux that are bringing Arnaud Demars into a perfect position as we go to this long, difficult left-hander. Will they all be able to make it around it safely? A little bit of brief respite for Edwin Kammertz. He's hit the barriers. He's heading for home. Will he manage to hang on? It's going to be really, really tight and difficult. He's inside the final 400 meters. Surely not, but he still drills it for the line as Française des Jeux come up from behind, and now is this launching off the far, drills it for the line and has an enormous gap. He's not just going to take bonus seconds, he's going to take a gap on the peloton behind. Arnaud Demars has time to kiss the crowd as he goes across the line to take his 2nd successive stage victory, his 5th in this race. And was that Sinkeldam getting up for a 2nd, or was it Ahlstrom?
It was Ahlstrom.
Your man Ahlstrom manages to get up for a great 2nd place, but that was a wonderful piece of opportunistic sprinting from Arnaud Demars. Another consummate team performance from Française des Jeux, and well, he was blowing kisses to the crowd. He could have had another couple of seconds on GC there if he'd wanted it.
Yeah, probably could have, but what a ride again by La Française des Jeux, and Arnaud Demars definitely, although he's had a couple of days off his bike, clearly he's still got some legs on him, and a confident move to go so early as well to close down the final couple of meters of